All right, you all. Well, let's get started because we have an hour and I'm really excited to be in community with you all in this virtual way. In some ways, it's really awesome. I know folks are attending from all over the world, so it's really special to get to be together and talk about this really sacred and important experience of trans and non-binary parenting in all the ways. So if you don't know me yet, my name is Maria Goodman. I use they, them pronouns. I live in Santa Cruz, California. I'm a queer midwife and a parent of three. And I co-wrote the book Baby Making for Everybody, and I'm the founder of the Pregnant Together community, which is a virtual community for queer folks and solo parents from preconception through parenting. We have over 200 members and a lot of trans and non-binary folks who are in many different stages of growing their families. And I'm just really, really passionate about supporting queer folks and solo parents to become parents, because to me, it's a reproductive justice issue. It's my most favorite thing in life, being a parent. And so I just really love supporting our communities around this whole experience. And let's see. So yeah, this is one of the ways, especially in this time in the United States, in the world, I think it's really important that we're visible and we share our stories and we connect with each other. So thank you all for being here. I just want to thank our sponsors for this panel, Mosey Baby, Mama Glow Foundation, Trans Fertility Co., which is run by one of our dear panelists, Tristan, and Q Plus Clinic based in California. So thank you all for supporting this. And if you're just joining, just a reminder to put any questions in the Q&A area, and I'll make sure to see them and ask our panelists. So let's get started with just like some little introductions, panelists. So if you could just share who you are, where you live in the world, and like a little intro about your families and your experience as a non-binary or trans parent, that would be wonderful. And let's see, Tristan, do you want to start us off?
Oh my goodness, that's a lot of pressure. Sure, I'm Tristan Reese. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm a gay transgender man who 7 years ago gave birth to my youngest son, Leo. I have two older kids who are adopted. We were an emergency family placement for them. So we have a blended family of sorts with two adopted and one that's biological. Let's see, as a transgender man, I'd been on testosterone for about 10 years before I went off of it in order to go through the conception process. And my partner has a body my partner's body makes sperm. And so we were able to DIY it ourselves the old-fashioned way, whatever that means. Yeah, and now we have a 7-year-old who is not a baby, as he tells me every single day. So that's a little bit about me and my story. Oh, yes. And then I was really frustrated and disappointed throughout my pregnancy process at how little information there was available. So I created an online ecosystem to educate other trans folks on the amazing, miraculous, magical things that our bodies can do.
Thank you, Tristan. Ivory, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, hello. I'm Ivory Foreman. I live in Westminster, Vermont. I have a 9-month-old little person who is pride and joy. Let's see. I, really started this experience incredibly optimistic, and I was like, this is gonna happen the first time, it's gonna and it didn't. But I will say that in general, my lens through most of it was a lot of optimism. And I found myself in the backseat of my car with no pants on. But anything for baby. And we ended up doing IVF, and it was really all over the print. I learned a lot, and it was, you know, there was just so much that nobody told us. But it was a really beautiful experience, and my partner and I like don't our bodies together could not create a baby. And so for us, using IVF was a means to an end. And we tried, artificial insemination, various ways with a midwife, without a midwife. There's a bunch of apps that you can use, and we tried like the whole gambit. And I think that, when the one thing that I really, was found really beautiful about it is like our experience, our other queer friends experience, our other non-binary friends experience, our other trans friends experiences. They're also varied, and the resiliency of us in terms of getting what we want. And that was the most challenging and exciting part about trying to conceive and becoming a parent.
Thanks, Ivory. Hez.
Hi everyone, my name is Hez Woolen. I use they them pronouns. I live in Berkeley, California. I identify as a transmasculine non-binary person, and 3.5 years ago, I gave birth to my kid. The process of conception was long and arduous, and she was ultimately conceived through medicated IUI at a fertility clinic. And there are just very many twists and turns along the way. And, I'm very thrilled to be able to be parenting her now. I'm in a co-parenting situation, and, the partner that I conceived her with and I are no longer together, but we're co-parenting. I'm also a social worker and therapist, and feel really passionate about just supporting other folks, other trans and non-binary folks through this process. So thank you.
Thanks, Hez. Go ahead, Erica.
Hi, everybody. My name is Erica Hart. My pronouns are she and they. I'm a Black, queer, non-binary femme, sex educator, and breast cancer survivor. I gave birth to my tiny human almost 2 years ago, which I keep thinking in my head, I don't know where does time is a thief, time is anti-Black, because what has happened. So like everyone has already said, similarly, getting pregnant was arduous and exhausting. I also, like Ivory, thought that I would get pregnant on the first time. If we just found the sperm, that would be sufficient. And it was challenging just to find sperm because we wanted to have a Black donor. And that was the first kind of entrance to, okay, this is going to be much harder than what I realized. Not even as a sex educator, not understanding that conception is a 20% chance. I still thought all the odds are in my favor, so I'll be fine. And it was a lot. It was a lot. It was very expensive. There is so much red tape, so much that is not ever talked about with having a sperm donor, with working with fertility clinics. As a fat person, as a person living with a chronic illness, a great deal of fat phobia and ableism that I experienced along the way, including my partner. And it was a ride. And it continues to be a ride as, queer and trans non-binary parents. But I'm grateful to be here, and I'm grateful that this conversation exists, because I would have loved to have been a part of this before, much earlier than when I was trying to conceive. Even when I was just thinking about it, I would have loved to be a part of this. So I'm grateful to be here and to lend any support to providers or folks who are interested in growing their family in this way as well.
Yay. Thank you all. Before we dive in, and I see folks are already asking questions, I have a feeling, I know for a fact that this hour, these next 48 minutes is not going to be enough to get all of these questions answered. And so I just want to say, like, that is why I created Pregnant Together, is to have folks together to support each other through this. And there's a lot of nuances in every part of this process that come up, and we need each other. And like, I think also in the queer family building world, we don't have a ton of like queer elders that are super visible and accessible. They exist. but I really hope that we can, you know, come together and resource each other. And so you're always welcome to contact me. Allison, if you can put my email so that people can find it, that would be great. And hope you'll consider joining the community so we can keep this conversation going. Gosh, there's so much to start with. I think one thing that I'd love to invite, and whoever's feeling like inspired, just feel free to jump in. Like focusing, we're not going to focus on the logistics of getting pregnant. I have a lot of other resources about that, but I'm curious to hear from you, like how your gender identity, and obviously our gender identities relate to many other experiences and identities we carry in the world, but like how did that influence, first of all, your decision to become a parent, and then like the process of getting pregnant and being pregnant? How did it feel in your queerness, in your transness, to embody that?
I can start.
Awesome.
I would say that one, I've never questioned that I should be a parent. I always wanted to, and so that was just always something that I knew that I wanted to do. But as I came into like my own, I realized that like society may not want me to do that. Um, and for various reasons, I had sort of, I will be 42 at at the end of this month. And for various reasons, I like waited a long time and was like, sort of doing research and development with my friends, on their babies and like, just really figuring things out. But I knew I knew that I wanted to be a gestational parent, and I knew that I wanted it to be special. And I knew that I knew what I didn't want. And I knew that like at any point in my most vulnerable, I never wanted to feel like a spectacle. I never wanted to feel uncomfortable. And so I, really played the long game and curated my life so that when we got to a place where we were pregnant, that I would be insulated in this way that felt really good to me. And so part of that was like, my partner got a job for the Department of Education in New York City so that we could have this specific type of healthcare so that we could do IVF. And then like once we were doing that, we were like, we want to live in the middle of the woods because we want our child to see green. And I also like didn't want to be pregnant in New York City. And so we like got a house here. My best friend has, lived in Vermont for like years, so that's how I have that connection. And then we like found a house like a walking distance through the woods to there. And so that was like, okay, this is right. This feels right. And so these things felt right. And then we thought about like, I'm a little crunchy, and I was like, okay, if I was like 20 years younger, I'd have a home birth. Don't really want to do that now. Like also was trying to be realistic. I like read about like the mortality rates of like Black folks and like black gestational parents, and like that scared me, and I knew that I still wanted some of that. And so we like found a birthing clinic, and at that birthing clinic like we went and we toured, and it felt good to me. And they were like, we're in the middle of Vermont, and they were like, would you like a Black trans doula? And I was like, yes. So like certain things sort of fell into place, but like I really insulated myself. I made sure that I only surrounded myself with people who told me good things. Very early on, my best friend, who has 2 children, told me, don't don't seek out anything scary. It's all gonna come to you via people, via the internet, via anything. Don't seek it out. And if you can, so like I didn't. So people would be like, oh, this, that. And I'd be like, sorry, can you tell me after I have a baby? And I really, to some people might say that like I put on blinders, but like that was what felt really good for me. And I feel like I went into it really knowing myself and knowing what I could do to make sure that I felt like being a gestational parent, my pregnancy was a beautiful and like magical thing.
Thanks, Ivory. Anyone else want to comment?
Well, I can say it's always weird when people are like, what was it like being a pregnant man? Because I was like, I don't know, that's the only experience I have. So like, what do I compare it to? But I will say, I think Ivory and I are the same age. I'm also 42. And I think I've been trans long enough that like I know hundreds of trans men and non-binary people who have given birth. And so for me, it never felt like a feminine experience, which I get like outside of the trans community, that doesn't make sense to people. But like when you've known so many dudes who've had babies, and it's like, yeah, most dudes can't have babies. Some can. I'm one of them. And also I'm a big nerd. And so like just the science and like the cool, weird shit that my body was doing was very cool and weird to me. And so I think just getting wrapped up in the fascinating thing of like, this is the week when the fetus is trying to get fingerprints, you know, or like this is the week when the ear starts to connect to the brain and they can like start to hear sounds that it will remember. Like just those cool, weird things. Like that's where I put a lot of my energy. Yeah, and so I didn't see it as a gender thing at all. It was just a cool thing that my body could do. And so it didn't disrupt my perception of myself as a man at all, which again, I know is strange to some people, but I don't know what to tell you. Like Ivory, I've been lucky to be surrounded by pretty dope people, and that helped too.
Yeah, so I'm 41, so we're, all around at a similar age. And I also knew that I wanted to be a parent for like as long as I can remember. And I think, I mentioned that I had a long and involved process, and I also found out I was pregnant in June of 2020. So one of the great joys of that was that I didn't really have to go anywhere, and I could be at home, like with, my fun clothes and makeup and just, play with gender as a pregnant person. And that felt really good. Like I used to have a long commute to San Francisco on public transit. And I was like, oh God, I couldn't have imagined doing that as like a pregnant non-binary trans person. And I agree that sort of the process of the pregnancy to me felt quite genderless. And it kind of was like a healing reparative experience because of the all of the gendering that we experience in the world as trans and non-binary folks, and all of the gendering that we see around us. And I think, for me also is challenging because I had a high risk pregnancy and I knew it was going to be high risk from the beginning. And, one of the things that was difficult was sort of trying to find community of other folks who were trans and also had high risk pregnancies or also had a long conception process. But, I think I really just try to find joy wherever I could in this process and like try to really focus on moments of gender euphoria, wherever I could find them. And also just surrounding myself with people that I knew were supportive of me and I knew were not going to misgender me, and, just leaning into that felt good.
Do you have anything you want to add, Erica?
Sure. I was just going to say that I never felt like pregnancy and childbirth was a departure from queerness or myself as a non-binary person. There is nothing to me more queer than pregnancy. Like it is truly otherworldly, that there was not a human here and now there's a human. Like that still blows my mind. Like I'll look at my child and say, where did you come from? Like I have a lot of folks who are very much connected to ancestors and do a lot of ancestor veneration. And that is a lot of the work that I was doing around pregnancy. I always have an altar, but I added an altar for who could potentially be coming into our life. And my mom is deceased, and I was very much connected to and still do speak to my mom and my grandmother, Harriet Tubman, like all of these people that I look up to really carry forward if this was going to happen for us. And the whole experience, even being pregnant, it just was so queer to me. I was so confused how people would just always associate a gender to it. And it's almost like they're trying so hard to make it with a specific gender, and it doesn't even make sense. Like, it is just, I don't know what else to say. Like, it truly is a queer experience. So it never ever felt like off or different for me. It felt completely in line, which is probably why I want to have another. I want to have that experience again. So yeah, it just felt very dope. And I grew up watching the L Word, unfortunately or fortunately, and an image that I always had in my mind was when Bet and Tina got pregnant, and it was just very Hollywood, and they used a turkey baster, and they had candles all around. And every time I would talk about wanting to get pregnant, I would talk about that scene. Now, let me tell you that when I went to do my IUI, there was no turkey baster. There was a birth worker. And because the birth worker did not have childcare, her 3-year-old sat in the corner on a tablet while I was, spread eagle on a bed having, getting an IUI done. So I think that there's nothing more queer about this experience. Like, all of the ways that you have to get creative to bring life into this world, all the ways that you have to be creative and resilient to keep life in this world. Like, it is, I mean, there's nothing more queer than that to me.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of questions about like how to find providers that you can trust, that can take good care of you. I know that Allison put a link. I have a fact sheet on the website that's free for some of the questions to ask. You can look at that in the answered question and answer area, but curious if folks can talk about like what steps they took to find safety for yourselves, for your prenatal care, while you were giving birth. And then there's also, which could be related, a question about now in this political moment, like how do we protect our families? And none of us here are legal experts, but if anyone wants to speak to that in any way, that's putting that here for the panelists.
Sorry, what was the first question?
How you found care providers that honored you in all the ways, prenatally and while you were giving birth.
Oh, I'll share. Similar to Ivory, I had a Black midwife, and I was clear that I wanted a Black midwife, and I wanted to work with somebody who understood queerness and transness, and I wasn't going to be dealing with being misgendered. I wanted to have a home birth. So I wanted to work with this midwife along the way to give birth at home. And it was truly the most magical experience ever working with her. And even though I eventually had to give birth in a hospital, having her there, I would never change that. She absolutely 100% saved my life, and it was phenomenal. I asked on Instagram who are some Black midwives that have a particular specialty in working with queer and trans folks. And I got back maybe 5 people. And there's lots of, different rules, as I'm sure many of you know, on becoming a midwife. And I lived in New York City at the time, and New York has some of the most awful laws keeping out midwives, especially Black midwives. So I wasn't surprised at the small amount of folks. So I interviewed people and really went with the person that made the most sense. Now, my midwife wasn't even in New York at the time. She lived in LA and was moving. So it really was just a fluke that I happened to be in LA and I met with her there. But I just did a lot of interviewing and wanted to see what people's politic was, not that they could ask pronouns or knew how pregnancy worked, but that they actually cared about Black life, because walking into hospitals, we are not walking out. So I didn't want to have that same experience, but now with a midwife. I wanted folks to actually care. And she did that. So interviewing, care team, and then I was with an acupuncturist. I went to an integral medicine doctor, and all of those folks were committed to me being pregnant. And they were never exhausted with me or annoyed or frustrated. And I really needed that care. So that's kind of how I came into like my care team around pregnancy.
Thank you. Anyone else want to share about how they found providers / any legal thoughts?
Well, I'm happy to go. I did not plan ahead like Ivory did, and I just had Kaiser. But I still didn't want to just go with whoever they stuck me with. And so when I called and I said, hey, I'm a transgender man, I'm pregnant, I need to set up prenatal care. But I want you to get off the phone with me and I want you to talk to all the CNMs, the certified nurse midwives, and I want you to find the one who's excited to work with me. And the intake nurse was like, oh, I'm sure it'll be fine. And I was like, no, I don't know that you're listening to me. I want you to get off the phone with me. I want you to like send them a message or like talk to them in the break room or whatever. And who is the one who's excited to work with me? And she was like, okay. And then she called me back and she was like, oh, Alyssa is like really excited, has been through a lot of trainings. Her brother's trans. She'd love to support you. And I was like, there you go. And so I kind of just had to take that attitude everywhere. I did the same thing when I went in to give birth at the hospital. I called ahead, I talked to the head nurse and I said, do not send anyone to me who's going to be weird. Can I put you in charge of making sure that everyone who walks in the door is not going to be weird? And she was like, yes, I got it. So it was just a lot of that. And for the legal question, again, not a lawyer. However, the question is a little bit vague. What's going to matter is what state are you in and what's your biological relationship to the child. So if you give birth to the child, there's virtually nothing they can do in any state legally. Unless, of course, there are some other issues at play. However, if it's your partner giving birth or if it's your partner asking about how to protect themselves, a second parent adoption is the only way to guarantee that both of you have a legal connection to the child. It doesn't matter if you're both on the birth certificate. A birth certificate, unfortunately, is not considered a legal document. And then I know this person asked about being low income, which is really important. You would be pretty shocked by how many lawyers, if you call them and say, I need to do a second parent adoption, we're queer or we're trans, could you cut us a break? I've been really surprised by how many lawyers I've worked with in most states in the country who will cut you a huge deal. And at the very least, let you do a payment plan. So those are the things that I would say are really important right now. The only other thing, and then I know we'll go on to somebody else, is just thinking really clearly that you're doing a termination of rights for if you're working with a sperm donor. However, you can do that as formally as possible if you're not working with a sperm bank, because what we are seeing in some of these states is that sometimes a donor will come back and claim parental rights. And if you get a conservative enough judge, that judge is like, yeah, okay. So that would be the other piece there. And again, something that a lot of cool lawyers are happy to do for very, 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 very low cost, if not free. And you can always email me to ask if I know anyone in your state, because I might.
Awesome. Thank you. We have so many questions. Oh, Ivory, you want to share?
I would say the only other thing that I would add in terms of just, care is if you are the type of person who has a hard time advocating for yourself or asking questions, bring that friend who asks those questions. Bring the friend who asks the uncomfortable questions, all the questions that you are like, oh God, why are you asking? Because you do want to know the answers to those and somebody needs to ask them. So like, if you can't advocate for yourself, have a buddy or your partner or your spouse, advocate for you because it's especially for questions because you want to know those answers.
Thank you. I'd love to ask you all, for those of you that were on testosterone before getting pregnant, we have some questions about partly the emotional aspect of going off of T, how you coped with that. Also, if you had top surgery, if you had any chest changes, how you coped with that, and also any like medical care that you received around that would be awesome if folks want to speak to that.
I can speak to it. Yeah, so before I started trying to conceive, I was on testosterone for 3 years, and I knew that I was going to have to get off. Like it was sort of in the back of my mind. And I never expected that I would be off for as long as I was off. And so I think, you know, in the beginning, I was like, okay, this is just happening to my body right now, and I'm just gonna like be here and present for it. And then it really, you know, it just started to feel like it was creating some like some more stress and dysphoria for me as time went on. I think like you know, emotionally speaking, it did not in the beginning when I first went off, it didn't feel terrible. And I felt like I could kind of, and I think also I was so excited about starting to try to get pregnant that I kind of bypassed that. But it was certainly complicated. And I did have chest surgery before being pregnant. I did not experience any changes in my chest.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that I was on testosterone for, you know, very lower doses for about like 8 years before, but am not great at consistently taking my shots. So I'd be like, so when I decided that I was gonna go off, I had already been off for a minute. But it wasn't necessarily by choice, it was just by circumstance. And then when I was off by choice after a while, when I first went off, I was like, I'll be pregnant next month. And then I wasn't. And then I wasn't pregnant next year. And then I wasn't pregnant the year after that. And I was having regular stuff. And I was like, this is not fun. And right, I would say when it got to just be where I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore, I got pregnant. But I tried to sort of, you know, when we were first trying to conceive and we were doing, you know, like the IUIs and like, you know, doing a lot of stuff on our own, and I was trying to do it, I just really ultimately got to this point where I was just like, I'm bad at this. I'm not connected to my body. And I have like so many pictures on my phone of like my fingers with like mucus on them still, you know, and like, and I got to this point where I was just like, I really would like for a doctor to just know from my blood if I'm ovulating, because I can't figure this out. And so I think that knowing the levels of comfortability that you have with your body and the levels of connectedness that you're interested in having, like taking your basal temperature, that is a real thing. Some people can do that. I cannot wake up at the same time and put a thermometer in my mouth accurately, like, you know, and so but knowing that, and then I think that really sort of informs some of the processes that, you know, you can take. And I feel like the being off of testosterone is going to be an up and down, but I think that for me, I just kept saying, well, I'm gonna have a baby and then I'll be on testosterone again. And then I'll have my baby and I'll just be me. So like that was sort of that, like just reminding myself that like this isn't forever.
And I can share the nerdy like science side. The best study we have on transgender pregnancy, everyone in the study resumed their ovulation or their menstrual cycle within 6 months of going off of testosterone. So the reason I share that is because it's really important to know that if you've been off T for more than 6 months and your cycle hasn't returned, you should go see a provider. People wait sometimes a really long time because they're like, it must be the testosterone. No, you probably got something else going on, fibroids, blocked tubes, PCOS, there's something else going on. And because to me, where the most grief shows up in trans pregnancy that I've witnessed is around how long it takes. And if you don't have to be off of your hormones, if you're on hormones, you don't have to be on hormones to be trans and pregnant. But if you were, like, you don't want to be off it for too long. It's the same when I talk to trans women about their fertility. Like, they don't want to be off estrogen and their androgen blockers for too long. So that's something that is important to note. The other thing I'll say is that there's no data right now on how long you should wait postpartum before going back on testosterone. So people ask, what's the number? There's no number. There's some factors, but there's just like not agreement right now. So I hope that's helpful for folks. And then there is a really great study by Trevor McDonald from Canada on lactation top surgery, regaining of chest tissue post-top surgery. So you can look that up, and I'm happy to send that to Maria. I'm sure they already have it, but if you don't, like, it's really great. Some people do have to get revisions to their top surgery if they have top surgery before pregnancy. And some people are able to lactate after having top surgery. So there's a lot of variables there. So I'll just say that little nerdy science piece there.
Thank you. I'm going to send a huge email to people in the next couple of days with so many resources. And I will say, and we put this in the book, and yes, there's not great data, but generally in the community, what the recommendation is for going back on T is waiting about 3 months after a front hole or vaginal delivery and 4 to 6 weeks after a surgical delivery, is what a lot of people are choosing to do. There's so many places we could go. What I would love, I mean, we have questions about like choosing to become a parent, considering the state of the world, considering climate change. I think that as queer folks and trans folks, like we bring a unique perspective to parenting children. And like, I guess my question for you all is like, where do you find hopefulness, and like, where does parenting intersect with like your radical, revolutionary queer work? And feel free to jump in even if you don't really know, because I know that's kind of a big question.
I think that for me, it's interesting because, before I even like started trying to conceive, I remember being on the internet and watching a moth that Tristan did about trying to conceive and about hope. And so it's interesting because a lot of like what he said really sort of resonated with me in and around this idea of no, I can't remember anything. But for me, I think that like my kid gives me hope, and that is one aspect of it, but the idea of not doing it, I knew that when I went into the process that I would always regret not having a child and that I would never regret a person. And when I can't be sad around my kid, and it's like I can't, like, he just like makes me smile. And I think that for me, why did I choose to have a kid in the state of the world, especially now, because everybody else is, in both a good way and a bad way. Everybody else is. And so I'm like, I usually I'm like a rebel, and I'm like, no, I want to have babies because I want to also bring goodness into the world and bring in hope and bring joy. And like my little one is such joy, such hope, and such happiness. And he is like the future. All of ours are the future. And like, everybody deserves one. And like, why did I bring one? Because like, the Christians are having tons of babies, and Jesus Camp is having tons of babies, and there's like babies being made on so many different levels. And like, we need to have babies so that we can also be putting in what we need to be putting into in this world. And that's why I had a kid. But I also had a kid because I recognize and respect that so many of my people and so many of my friends cannot or will not. But that doesn't mean that they don't love babies and that they don't want the future to be here. And so I had my child for myself, but for my queer friends, so that they could also have little ones and little people in their life.
Thank you.
I think it absolutely intersects, in that, as a Black femme person, my ancestors were and still are, Black femme folks are robbed, Black people are robbed of choice all the time. So the choice to have a baby was really important, having that choice and being able to speculate on it. I think what's different from cis hetero folks is that a lot of times they just, oh, surprise, I have a baby. There's not a lot of choice in the matter. A lot of it has to do with, well, it was a oops, and that's never going to happen for queer and non-binary folks, trans folks necessarily. Oftentimes it is very much thought out and considered. And I think that that is really beautiful, like children who knew that they were thought of and had a lot of intention behind it. And also that, to be able to raise a child to also know that they get to have choice, to know that they get to resist and really live in a radical environment. As a queer baby, I did not grow up in a radical environment. I grew up in a very forced environment, forced to be excellent and some sort of like Black excellence kind of thing, forced to constantly do labor under capitalism, forced to constantly perform, and love being transactional in that way. If I got A's on a test, then that meant that I was going to get affection from my parent. Really raising a kid and the opportunity to raise a human to know that they get to have affection all the time, and they deserve love all the time, that love and their worth is not connected to the labor that they do. I just was really excited to have I didn't push a baby out, but to push a baby out into the world that that is going to come with those tools. I was very excited to do so. I love young people. I think young people are absolutely amazing. I think adults are the folks who need the work, and we should be more worried about more adults in the world than we should be about young people. So that's why, I feel like, again, it's a very queer experience, a very radical experience, and it's absolutely connected to my politic, to have had kids. And I don't think it's wrong to question and consider, maybe I don't want to have kids because of the state of the world, because of climate change, because of white supremacy. I don't think that that's a wrong thing to consider. I think more people should consider what it's going to require to raise a child in a world that looks like this. I don't think that's considered enough. So I think that's a good question folks should be asking themselves. Absolutely.
Thank you. Hez or Tristan, you want to speak to this at all? No? Okay.
I guess I'll just say that, I feel like it is really a chance to do things differently and to, rate than like I was raised, and to raise little beings who are, also going to be revolutionary as well. So, like my 3-year-old will like correct people if they misgender me, it's like so sweet. And, just thinking about like that not ever being a discussion when I was a kid. No, it's a really different time now, but still. So, to think about sort of what we can teach them with our lived queer and trans experience as their parents.
Similarly, I'm curious what you feel like that your non-binariness or transness offers you as a parent. Like the perspective of being a trans or non-binary parent. I think it's so cool. I love being a non-binary parent myself. So that's question number 1. Question number 2 is, what do your children call you?
So my kid's nickname is Booba Shuba. Don't ask me why. I don't know where it came from. When I saw them, I said Booba Shuba. That's what I said. And now my child calls me Booba. Yeah. Yeah. So it's like the nickname has backfired. I love it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I'm Booba. That's fine. I thought you were going to hear him say Booba because he was just screaming it.
How about you, Tristan?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the blessings of being a queer person, a trans person, raising any kids, whether they're ones you gave birth to or not, is what you've already heard, Erica and Ivory and Hez talk about, which is letting our kids be free. Giving them that gift of liberation, that they get to be themselves and they get to blaze their own path and not have a parent put judgment on them, put shame on them, belittle them, try to fit them in some kind of box that was never made for them and that they were never meant to fit into. It also means that we get to teach them the resiliency strategies. I actually won't say we, because I don't want to speak for anybody else, but it means that I get to teach him the resiliency strategies that I had to learn the hard way. He has long hair, he likes wearing dresses to school, and he's very clear that he's a boy. And he comes home and is like, someone said something about my dress at school, and we get to have a conversation about that. Because obviously I have my own shit around gender, and I know how to talk to him about those things. And I think for me as a trans person, this isn't really answering the question you asked, but the gift back of having a kid is, it sounds so selfish, but to have someone look at you and love all of who you are unconditionally. Like, I don't know as a trans person that I've ever felt that. Like, even from my parents, even from my incredible partner, but to have someone just look at you with those eyes and see all of it, and that just the pureness of that connection is incredibly healing and incredibly powerful, so hopefully there's some mutuality. I hope he's getting something from having me as his parent. I hope all my kids do. Because what I get back from them is incredibly healing and powerful for me.
Thank you. And what do your kids call you?
Oh, they call me Dada, and my partner, I'm Daddy, they're Dada, my partner's Dada. But then often it's Dad and other dad, just whoever they're talking to or not talking to. Yeah.
Sweet. Want to go, Ivory?
My kid hopefully will call me Pubba, Pubba, and my spouse is Momo. And yeah, I feel like we're really excited to, embark on like so many aspects of parenting, and like we're sort of at the precipice. And I just remember like, being pregnant with my spouse, and I was like, no, you don't even understand. Just this whole world is going to open up to us, like parties, little people parties, and just like so much, but like and it's so beautiful just, in the 9 months that we've had them, just how much our world has opened up, because we want for him to explore and to be able to see it all. And it's, I feel like the levels of extroversion that I am extending for this child is beautiful, and I love it. And I'm like, right at the beginning, I was like, what is it going to be for me that is going to pull me, that is going to be the hard thing? And he is such a people person, and so I am too now, again. And it's beautiful.
Thanks. I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, my kid calls me Abba or Abi, and my co-parent, who is also trans and non-binary, is Dada or Daddy. And I just had no idea what I wanted to go by as a parent. And I am Jewish, but Abba is Hebrew for dad or daddy, but I'm not like religious or observant or anything like that. But then a friend suggested it, and I just felt like it fit. And I just went with it, and I feel, like it just feels like it's very lovely and comforting.
Thank you. Well, we probably have time for one more question. We're nearing the end. We have some very appreciative people thanking you all for sharing your experiences and helping combat some of the invisibility that many folks feel during this process. So thank you for being here with us. I wanted this conversation reminded me, in the Pregnant Together community, we have like an ongoing list of parent names. And I think what's so interesting about parenting is it's so dynamic. And every stage brings out these different parts of like ourselves and the children. And so I just want to say again to everyone who's here, I hope you'll consider joining the community. It's $20 a month. And if that is not doable for you, message me and we will find something that works, because I really want people to just like come join. We do Zoom support groups, there's chat rooms, there's so many resources. A lot of folks are asking about choosing a sperm donor. I do live workshops about choosing donors, focusing on known donors. There's like so many things. All the recordings are available. And there's not really a lot of centralized space in our world where we have access to this information. So I hope that you'll consider joining the community and just like building this together. And let's see, we have about 4 or 5 more minutes, and I guess I just want to do like one last go around for all of you panelists. If there's anything that you felt wasn't spoken to, it can be about a logistical thing or an emotional thing. If you need a prompt, sharing like a joy that you experience as a non-binary or trans parent. I think we've brought a lot of joy here. I think that, and that was like one of my intentions. So thank you for that. But yeah, any like final thoughts to share with folks that you feel like we haven't quite touched on yet?
I'll go because mine's short, which is just what I tell any queer person who wants to parent, which is, you hold tight to your desire to become a parent and then hold lightly to how you get there. Because like bodies are very complicated. And the more rigid you are around like, I'm going to carry, no, my partner's going to carry, we're going to do it this way, then like the more stressful it becomes. And so if just the goal is parenthood and like, let's figure it out, it can be a little bit less stressful. And I promise you at the end, when you have a child or children, you're not going to look at those kids and be like, well, I would love them more if I birthed them instead of like that. It just doesn't happen. Same thing with sperm donors. You're never like, oh, we should have picked number 227. You just get the kid that you're supposed to get. And that's kind of the magic of it. So yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Tristan.
I would just like to add to be flexible, similar to what Tristan said. I spiraled and I threw all of our Teflon pots and pans away. I changed all of our containers from plastic to glass. And I'm telling you all this to not be like me. To please be easy and be flexible. I wanted a home birth. I did not have a home birth. I had preeclampsia. I had emergency C-section. And literally everything that I have tried to plan from becoming pregnant to having a kid has not gone the way that I thought it was going to go. Trying to get out of the house with a baby or even a 1-year-old, impossible. So be flexible, be generous, be tender with yourself. Like I find myself wanting to reach back to the ways that I was treating myself when I was pregnant and to do now, to really lean on rest, especially if you are Black. There is a lot of pressure for us to constantly be doing labor, even through pregnancy. And I really want to encourage folks to lay down somewhere and take care of their bodies. That's what I would say is just be gentle with yourself, be tender, be flexible, and remove anyone from your life that is causing you undue stress. I think that that was some of the best advice that I got. And honestly, when those people left, I got pregnant.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would add that, if you're, working on, trying to conceive within the context of like, the fertility, industrial complex, unless a doctor has told you you are not infertile, you need the science. And you're going to enter a world where most of the people that are using it are infertile. And that is not the lens that you need to look through and to, as much as you can, to remind yourself, because it's going to feel like that. But none of those numbers are about trans people. If you're Black, they're not about Black people. Like none of like they're not doing studies on us yet. And so like this is a world that is not necessarily equipped or designed for us. We can make it work and we will make it work, but know that, because it's hard. But knowing that is like, a kind of nice little cushy blanket under some crap.
Yeah, I think I'll just add, just know that there are people who have walked this road before you for, generations, decades, and they're going to be people who walk in this road after you. And, the process, as hard as it can be, is temporary. And eventually, like there's something on the other side of that. And so that's something that it helped to kind of hold me through that time. And there, that just to hopefully, reach out to folks who have been through it for solidarity and support.
Yeah, combating that isolation as much as possible, and like coming to things like this. And we got questions about finding folks locally. And I think the internet is really good for that. There are Facebook groups. Right now in Pregnant Together, we have folks meeting in New York, Seattle, the Bay Area, in person. My vision is that like in all different cities, we will have people, going through similar processes and getting together and supporting each other. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, Tristan, Ivory, Erica, and Hez so much for participating in this. Thank you, Allison, for supporting us on the back end. I really appreciate that. And seriously, sending you all like so much love and solidarity. And Erica, I think you said tenderness and boundaries. Those were like the two things that I think
I
is
didn't
like.
say boundaries, but I should have said boundaries.
Well, you spoke
Boundaries.
to
I said
boundaries.
remove people, but boundaries was the better word. Yes.
Yes, tenderness and boundaries, I think, is like those are some good post-it notes to put up, to support yourself during this time. And sending you all so much love. And yeah, feel free to reach out. You're going to get an email from me, hopefully tomorrow, maybe the next day, depending on how much time my children give me. Yeah, I look forward to sharing more resources with you and hopefully addressing some of the questions that we didn't get to.
And thank you for creating a space. This is so, so important. I can only speak for myself. I'm so grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very life-giving for me. And like with the results of the election last week, I was like, oh yeah, like feeling like even more gravity and inspiration to build this community for all of us. Yeah. Thanks all. Have a beautiful night. Bye.